Welcome back, everyone, to ADW 2.0 after the break. The first session after the break is going to be with Miss Katerina Kamprani. She's from Athens. She's an architect, and she's best known for her personal project, The Uncomfortable. So balancing humor, art, and design, she analyzes and redesigns everyday objects in order to make them deliberately inconvenient. She has presented her work at several design conferences and participated in exhibitions throughout Europe. Katerina's work has had an impact on many different levels and has been used for editorial, advertising, and educational purposes. Without any further ado, welcome, Katerina.
Hello, everybody. Hi. So let me start by sharing my screen. And just a moment. Okay, is everything set up? Good. So yeah, hello. So first of all, I want to thank Ahmedabad Design Week for inviting me. I especially love this year's subject. Oh, just a moment. Yeah, because I have an inner child in me that loves toys, and I think I have surely toyed with design. So as we said, my project is called The Uncomfortable. I design deliberately inconvenient everyday objects, like the boots that you see here, this watering can that waters itself, this teapot that is very long, and the corresponding mug for long tea. So a small introduction. My project started almost 10 years ago. It was a very casual, it was a very personal project. And my goal was basically to amuse myself and my friends. Most of the objects were designed in 3D. It was 3D visuals from 2012 to 2013. It was most of the objects. And then I was uploading them on a Facebook page. And the project became somehow viral in 2013. And then steadily, it has been growing all over the years, and I have been growing the collection. So this is my first big job. It was with a German advertising agency called Jung von Matt, and they contacted me to do an ad campaign for Smart, and they used 3 images to state that design is nothing if it's not smart. So they used the wine glass, the watering can, and the chain with a fork. And a year later, they made the same campaign as a promotional mail campaign, and they produced 3 of the objects in limited edition, and they sent it out to clients. And this was in 2015, and it was the first time any uncomfortable objects were produced in 1-to-1 scale and material. Here is Brandines, a very popular German magazine, and they use the uncomfortable rain boots on the cover of their issue on economic nonsense. And there's the broom on the cover of a German book. And another very interesting collaboration I had was with neuropsychologists from the University of Bologna in Italy. They used images and later also physical objects. And they used the uncomfortable objects and the corresponding comfortable ones in order to measure the reaction time in the brain and the neural system. So normally, when you see an object like a mug, the nerves in your hand are activated just by seeing it because the brain recognizes a handle. And these scientists found out that with the uncomfortable pictures, this doesn't happen, and that helps them with doing some experiments with people with motor problems, motor skills in their hands. So the images have been used in ads, in education, in research, and up until 2017, the project was mainly visuals. I had a few prototypes from the Smart Ad campaign. I did some myself, but I did not actively try and make them as real life objects because I thought, you know, they are a symbol. They work really well as images, and why should I spend the time or resources to bring useless objects to life, right? But that all changed because I was invited to do my first personal exhibition, and I thought it would be really nice to have tangible objects in an exhibition. So I produced 15 of the objects, and I participated in Zagreb Design Week, where I was the featured artist, and their theme was, "What is the problem?" And this is a photo from the exhibition in 2017. In 2019, I had participated in two big exhibitions that I'm very proud of. The one was in IKEA Museum in Sweden, and the exhibition was Everybody, and it was about inclusive design. So, and my objects were there to remind you, how do you feel when something is not really designed for you and is not really working for you? And the other one was in Cité des Sciences et l'Industrie in Paris, in Paris, and it was all about design failures. And the same thing, the same theme of the exhibition is held now, again in France, in Saint-Étienne, in Cité du Design. So today I want to speak about chairs and tell you my story through different chairs, and forks, and what is design, what is user experience, and about innovation. So let's start with the chairs, the designer's favorite object. So I will start my story very early with the school chair. So I sat down on a chair like this for 12 years of my life. I was a very good student. I was very good, especially in math and science. And I was also very good in drawing. I was an artistic child. So when I finished school at 1999, I had to choose university. And back then in Greece, we didn't really have too many choices for doing something creative. There was architecture school, which was very prestigious, and in a very prestigious polytechnical school here in Athens, Greece. And then there were other diplomas in graphic design, interior design, and art restoration, and just that. But these were a bit lower diplomas. And and also fine art school. But this was, I mean, let's say that the idea in my family was that an artist is gonna be poor and starving, right? So architecture school for a good student like me was basically a one-way street, because it would combine the science and the creativity. And so at that point, I haven't even heard of design. I didn't even know what it was. It wasn't even on my radar back in 1999. So I got in the school. And the first time I got in contact, in real contact with design, was in my second year of architecture. We were on an educational trip in Barcelona, and we visited the pavilion of Mies van der Rohe. And he has designed this chair. And I was admiring the pavilion. I really liked it, but I was also very tired. And I sat in one of these, and it was so comfortable. It was so nice, and I really liked the design also. And I used to use it in my renderings and drawings afterwards. So that was like my first contact with design. So around my third years of studies, I started feeling miserable. And I was feeling very much like this chair, which is an installation by Mario Navarro. It's quite recent. I felt a great pressure by the fact that architecture is very permanent. Let's say that in a hypothetical scenario where I would design a building, and maybe I wouldn't feel confident about my design choices. I could not just say, oh, well, that's fine, we will do better next time. This building is a permanent structure in the city grid. I mean, architects are responsible for things that stay there for decades. You can just, like undo them or demolish them if you just make them. So that made it was a pressure on me. And at that point, I was more interested in humor, and I liked stand-up comedy. I was reading comics, and I started making myself funny pictures and videos. And the architecture, all of this did not really have a room in architecture, or that's how I felt. It was too serious for me. But the school was very prestigious, so I was half in already, so I did try and push on and get my degree. And after some hard work and determination, I did get my degree, and I started working as an architect. And around that time, I started spending a lot of time on the internet, and specifically on design blogs. So my two favorite blogs were Design Boom, I think, and Switch Me's back then. And they were full of smart and playful design projects. I remember really liking that chair, and this is by Peter Bristol, because it looks like it's levitating, but in reality, it's supported on one leg, and it's connected to a huge plate underneath that carpet. So I thought that was really smart. I mean, I would see stuff like this chair that grows into a cactus. This one is not even a chair. It's just a skeleton, and it provides you with the arms. So you have to provide the seat. So you could put it around any stool or, I don't know, anything, and it will give you the armrests. Lovely. So I really enjoyed seeing these smart projects. So they play with some kind of form, and they remind you of something else, and that creates some kind of surprise. So that was very inspiring to me. And I thought, well, I want to be a designer. That's it. It's design for me. That's what I should do. So I started doing personal projects in 3D. And this is one of my designs. It's a huge chair, which is essentially a table. So this was supposed to be functional because you would put it in a narrow kitchen in a small apartment, and you would use the back of the huge chair to also like as a space to put, I don't know, magazines or stuff like that. I mean, now that I see it, it's naive. But back then I really liked out of scale objects. I was very impressed by stuff like that. And I was very proud of designing this. And so I thought, maybe I should do a postgraduate degree, and maybe, like to get a new direction and maybe start a career. So I've heard of this new school of design that was in Greece. And they were accepting architects. And I thought, so, okay, this is better. Like, this is a smaller scale than architecture, and I will get the chance to be playful and don't have this big responsibility that the architect has, right? So I got accepted. The program there was not only about the design of objects. It was also about the design of interactive systems like websites and apps and services. And teachers kept on asking and posing that question: what is design? And they would say that good design answers questions and solves problems. That the role of the designer is not to make beautiful things, it is to observe, identify a problem, and then design a solution that will solve that problem. So if we apply that way of thinking on a chair, then the problem or the user's goal is to rest our body, right? And the chair is simply a tool that helps us achieve this goal. Alejandro Aravena observed, is also an architect, observed that a tribe of Indians, the Ayureo, prefer to sit on the ground and sometimes use a strip of cloth like a belt to relieve their waist and free their hands. So in 2010, at the Fori Salon in Milan, he introduced this product called Chairless, which is essentially a belt that you strap around your body to keep you together and supported. So this product does not claim to replace the chair. It is addressed to people that would sit down on the floor anyway. So maybe at a concert, at a festival, on the beach. And I think it's a very good example of reconsidering what it means to sit down, what it means to rest our body, and what tool we could use in order to achieve that. But tool is not a traditionally safe chair. And here is another product, and they have actually the same name, but it's a completely different function and form. This is also called Chairless, and it is an exoskeletal system that you can wear, and you can use it as a standing stool whenever you want to rest. So this is mainly aimed at people who work standing for many hours, like production line workers or doctors in surgeries, and it gives them the opportunity to rest their body at any time, anywhere they are. Okay, so none of these products are really chairs. Okay, yes, I have grouped them as chairs because the end goal of the user is similar, but they are not chairs. But what actually defines a chair really, or defines an object? So when the user comes in contact with an object, two things happen in our brains. The one has to do with understanding what the object is, and the other one is to understand how to use the object. So the mental model is to understand what an object is. It is basically a representation that we have in our brains that connects what we see to a previously known function. This could be because of a previous experience. For example, we observed someone using that object, or we have tried it ourselves, or someone told us what that is. So this gentleman here has probably never seen a chair before in his life, and no one told him what that is and what to do with it, right? The conceptual model is about understanding how to use an object. All objects give us some information, right? These are called affordances and limitations. And when the parts of an object are visible, the brain recognizes physical or logical constraints. We can understand the size of the object in relation to our bodies, if something is movable, if we can push or turn something, and all other sorts of information. And the brain gets into simulation mode while trying to figure out how to use this object. And seeing that chair, we recognize from the curved base that this chair can rock sideways. And even by seeing it, our brain simulates the movement from left to right. This chair is designed by French artist Zach Carlman, and he is most known for his masochist teapot on the cover of Don Norman's book, The Design of Everyday Objects. Don Norman explains really well how every object, it gives off signals and of how they want to be used. The object itself says to you how they want to be used, and good design really relies on that. And this has an application not only in the design of objects, basically it has an application in anything to do with visual communication. So after going through all that, I started realizing that design might not be what I thought it was. As a designer, I was supposed to provide innovative solutions to a problem, which in extreme cases, like the ones I showed you before, the chairless, it might mean to totally step away from the mental model of an object, because that new solution would be something completely different. But also, this new design should have a very good conceptual model that help the user understand immediately how to use it. And of course, industrial design means that objects are mass produced, and this is a big responsibility. So maybe the playful objects that I liked when I was watching online and I loved them, basically they were more experimental projects or even art. And they weren't really, designed products. But this is quite a famous design. This is the Cello stool by Achille Castiglione. And he was a very famous architect and designer in Italy from the 50s to the 70s. So was it okay to be playful in design or not? So I was very confused. And I mean, frankly, not only about design. And at that point, I didn't feel stable in many ways, exactly like that stool. So around that time in Greece, we entered a very bad state of an economic crisis. And I started to be very pessimistic and cynical. And I thought this is not the optimal time to start a new beginning, really. How could I be an industrial designer in Greece? I mean, the country has no industry, and with a crisis, it's probably not going to get any better. And so where would I get a job? And even if I was lucky to get a job in design, how could I apply this new way of thinking? I mean, I could not imagine a scenario where, I would hypothetically be hired as a designer and my boss, would tell me, let's design a chair. And I would tell him, oh no, let's start rethinking what does it mean to sit down? What tools should we use to sit down? Let's not design chair, let's design something else. So, I mean, yeah, I was cynical. And because of this, and because of other personal reasons, I quit. And I never finished my studies on design. And I returned back to my hometown, Athens. But at that point, I was determined not to go back to architecture. And I did one more time a try to change my career. And I worked very briefly in an advertising, which was also a dream of mine, but that didn't go well at all. So then I just stopped trying. I just went back to working as an architect. I was working 8 hours a day. I got used to the idea that I have to be responsible, and especially with my money. So that was it. So having had that break, at some point, a year later, out of the blue, I designed this sketch. And it reminded me of this term that I learned in the design studies, the term of user experience. So when you interact with an object, you will get through some steps to achieve your goal. And this is closely connected to the conceptual model. If any of these steps are hard, this can make your experience frustrating. And although you can probably achieve your goal, you might end up having a bad user experience. So this toilet, for me, it was a very good example of bad user experience translated in real life, because it gives you all the tools to achieve your end goal. You successfully, right? But imagine how it would be if you had to go to the toilet in the middle of the night, or if you had to climb that ladder barefoot, or even, if you had a toilet emergency, it wouldn't be very pleasant, right? So that's how it all started. So what happened, this is one of my designs. What happened without me realizing is that I learned the way of thinking for design, and basically I reversed it. I asked the wrong question. I said, how would objects be if me as a designer was trying to give the user a bad experience? And also, after consuming all that content from the internet, I ended up doing something very similar. I took forms that we all recognize, and I put a spin on them to create a surprise. So basically, I think that's why probably the project had such a success in social media, because it had the exact same recipe for success. So what I do is that I choose an object, and I use simple everyday objects, because we all understand what they are and how they work, and we have a very strong mental model of them. And I analyze all the steps in the user interaction, and I look for all the physical affordances and limitations of the object. And then I tried to sabotage only one of these elements. Well, this sabotage has to be very discreet, because if I change too much of the object, then it stops being a chair, right? So I really try to keep the model. So as the brain recognizes the object, at the same time, it automatically gets in the simulation mode and analyzes the elements, and it finds out that there's something wrong with it. And some people get very visceral reactions because that problem occurs in the simulation mode of the brain, so they can feel it. So these brains that I showed you, they all have something wrong with the sitting surface. This one is curved. This one only gives you half of the sitting surface, and this one is sloped, right? But a chair is much more than a sitting surface. It has so many more properties. It must be rigid, it must be at the right height, the sitting area and backrest must be at a certain angle. It is a movable object. It's only for one person, and the sitting area must be accessible by that person, right? So in this chair, I sabotage only the accessibility to the sitting surface. And I really enjoy the process of thinking this way because it feels like a puzzle or a challenge. And the chair, especially, it was not a very easy object to crack. And this specific idea came to me years later than all the three others. And that is very impressive because it shows how deeply ingrained these forms are in our minds that we just cannot step away from them. And because we take these things for granted. So speaking about taking things for granted, the chair is an object that exists from the ancient years, it does. But that doesn't mean that everybody had a chair to sit down. People sat on chests, on benches, on stools. These were the ordinary seats for people for everyday life. And only people of authority would sit on the chair. And that is why we use the term chairman. I mean, for the person that has power in a committee. And of course, let's not forget the ultimate armchair, the throne. But now we have an abundance of chairs, right? In our household, we are two people and we have 16 chairs and 3 couches. And also, think about the chairs that are waiting to be used by you outside of your house, in the school, in the office, in restaurants, in theaters, in stadiums. And yeah, well, maybe not right now. I mean, speaking about taking things for granted, who would thought that there would be a time where, like going to the restaurants and the theaters and the stadiums would be a disease-spreading activity, right? And therefore not being allowed. Mm. But enough talk about chairs, okay? Let's examine another object. Another object we take for granted. Let's talk about forks. Everybody knows what a fork is, right? Well, maybe not everybody. Ariel the mermaid found the fork in a sunken ship. She has no idea what it does, and her friends tell her that this is a dingle hopper and that you're meant to use it on your hair as a comb. So in that way, her brain formed the mental model that connected this item with hair brushing. So that is a very great example of a wrong mental model. Okay, that was it. We all know forks are for eating. So let's analyze the fork. It has a handle for holding it. Then it extends to a wider surface, and then it has 4 teeth to pierce the food, right? Now let's think about how to make this uncomfortable. We can sabotage the handle by replacing it with chain, and now you have to fish for your food. We can detach the teeth from the body and let them dangle and have like a musical instrument. And if we analyze the fork a bit more, we'll see that it is a very small, light object that we can lift very easily. So why not make it thick and heavy? And this way, it's not only hard to lift, but also you cannot even pierce the food. So, well, you could use it to make mashed potatoes. And another property of the fork is portability. You're free to move your fork from the kitchen to the dinner and vice versa. In this installation, I have connected the forks of two people on a dinner table. Underneath the table, there's a chain, and that chain is only long enough to lift one fork to one person's mouth. And here you can see it in action. So by now, I hope you feel some kind of appreciation for how comfortable a normal fork is. The useful side of this project is that it actually helps people to realize that the tools that we use every day, they're very well designed. Because I think that some concepts like comfort are better perceived when they are absent. And this is why everybody says that good design is usually invisible, because when something works really well, you don't really notice it, right? But forks were not always perfect. The fork is not only a very recent addition to the tableware, it was also a very controversial product. And to get to this form that it is now, it has been through many stages, and people did not use forks. They used to eat with their hands and spoons and knives, but not forks. Forks existed, but their main use was to keep the meat steady while it was being cut, like in this image. And so I don't think it didn't seem a good idea to put a weapon, basically, which is a sharp metal aggressive object in your mouth, right? And if you did put this in your mouth, it tasted like metal. So that brings me to the idea of innovation and how it is very connected with discomfort and failure. And there's actually a very nice quote by Douglas Adams, who is the writer behind The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. And in another book, he says, anything that is in the world when you are born is normal and ordinary, and it's just a natural part of how the world works. Anything invented between when you're 15 and 35 is new and exciting and revolutionary, and you can probably get a career in it. And anything invented after you're 35 is basically against the natural order of things. So if you think about it, any object that we take for granted and we think it's natural to use must have been at some point a very extremely innovative object at some point in history. So the story of the fork goes like this. In the beginning of the 11th century, a niece of the Byzantine emperor married the son of a general of Venice, and she brought with her a small box of gold forks, and she used them in her wedding feast. And these strange tools made a great impression, and actually the church did not like so much the display of wealth, and it said it was a blasphemy to imply that the fingers given to us by God were not enough to eat. This attitude of the church to this innovative diabolical object did not help at all, and their use was limited until the 15th century. So this is what forks look like, and it was normal for people to have their own knife and fork, which would be kept in a special box called the katerina. And whenever someone threw a dinner party or feast, all the guests would bring their own katerinas to eat with. And it was only until the 17th century that forks slowly began to have more teeth and get the curve and helps us scoop the food also with their teeth. So any kind of innovative product, it will need time to evolve and to get to a stage that it will be comfortable to use. So as we see with the example of the fork, it's not only the form or the function of the tool, it sometimes is also the concept of the tool that makes people uncomfortable. So innovation can only come when we go outside of our comfort zone, and we should not be afraid of products being uncomfortable or even a failure, because that's the only way things can evolve. And a great tool that helps us evolve is our brain. And basically it's the best tool we have, right? And we have to care for it and exercise it like we do for our body. And a great way to do that is challenge the norm and rethink things that we take for granted. And to close today's talk, I wanted to share with you some of my new work. Uh, Everybody can be trapped and stay comfortable in one way of seeing things, right? And myself, I've been doing uncomfortable things for 10 years. So that's granted for me, right? So I thought it would be a good idea to challenge myself with a new medium, which is animation. And that gives me new properties of objects that I can play with, right? So I leave you with my Mobius fork, and I thank you very much for watching. And I'm open to questions. You can do, I would be very happy to answer any of your questions. I'm gonna stop sharing now.
Hi, Katerina.
Hello, just a moment. I'll stop
Wow,
sharing.
just a fun and engaging session, actually.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we don't have much time, so I just quickly ask you one question.
Okay.
So it's interesting. Do you have any trick to spot the humor?
Any trick to spot the humor?
Yeah, like how do you go about it? How is your process?
Well, the thing is, like, I go through a lot of ideas that I discard, and most of them are not funny. I mean, they're peculiar, but they're not funny. And the only way that I basically, when I see something and I laugh myself, like I make myself laugh. So that's how I know it's funny. Well, maybe it's funny for me only, but when I make myself laugh and I surprise myself with something that I have designed, I think that's good. I say that's good. It's a good idea. It will be successful.
That's a nice way of thinking. Actually, your sense of humor is extremely enjoyable, and I love the way you express it through your designs. The colors and the visuals of your products also like kind of show your personality. It was really interesting to know about the design failures that you were speaking about and how you went about with your career as well. I think that will help students to understand that failure is actually first step towards success.
Yes, exactly. And failure is only is basically a great tool, so we can understand what we don't like. Because sometimes we fail because we don't try enough, because maybe we just don't like what you know. Or what we're not good at, so we shouldn't spend any energy on doing something that we're not really good at. I mean, why do that? So you can only succeed through failure. It's the only way you can. I don't think anybody just instantaneously
Absolutely.
successful. And and if success comes instantly, you don't perceive it as success. You really have to fail first in order to feel successful.
And thank you so much, Katerina. It was really nice to have you here. I say my thanks from UID, Kanawati University, and of course, Ahmedabad Design Week. We love to have you here. Hope we can see
I thank you for the opportunity, and I'm really interested to see all the other talks about toys and design, because that's one of my favorite subjects. So thank you for having me.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yes. Have a nice rest of the day.